But here we are at the woohoo phase of the evening. Let's launch this book, and Ali Whitelock, Sydney poet, is going to launch the book for us, and we're going to have readings by the first and second prize winners in the Liquid Amber Prize, which is Lindsay Tuggle and Renee Pettit-Ship. But before we get going, I'm just going to introduce Ali so I can sing her praises before she sings other praises. Ali Whitelock, as many of you will know, is a Scottish poet and writer. Well, you say that, Ali, but I think you're really Scottish Australian. Anyway, we can debate that, but a Scottish poet and writer living on the south coast of Sydney with her French chain-smoking husband. Her second collection, The Lactic Acid in the Calves of Your Despair, Ali is a wonderful titleist, if there's such a word, which was published by Wakefield Press, was long-listed for the 2021 ALS Gold Medal for Outstanding Literature. Her debut collection, And My Heart Crumples Like a Coke Can, also published by Wakefield, has a forthcoming UK edition by Polygon in Edinburgh. Her memoir, Poking Seaweed with a Stick and Running Away from the Smell, about growing up in Scotland in the strange and brutal kingdom that we call home, was published by Wakefield and launched to critical acclaim at Sydney Writers' Festival in 2008 and in the UK in 2009. Ali has a new collection to be published by Wakefield Press pretty soon in February 2023. Thank you, Ali. I'm going to hand over to you at this point.
Thank you, Rose. When she wasn't watching, I bound her hands, taped her mouth, and silently dragged her into the cupboard. I left her there to die while I wore her skin, the real girl rotting into the floor, fading from meaning. I took up her life, carried it forward, unsure of what she called herself or the names she answered to, but sure of this: no one is coming to rescue her. This is only one verse of the poem Dissociation by Shelley Beamish, but when I read it here in the Poetry of Encounter, it was so gripping to me that I wanted to open this launch with it. This poem terrifies me in all its haunting beauty. Its desperate last line stops me in my tracks. I urge everyone to read it in all its 3-verse glory, as I urge everyone to read every poem in this anthology. When I read these poems, I feel them in my bones. I feel them in my skin. This is precisely what I want poetry to do. I want it to cut to the very quick of me, and these poems do this time and time again. If I could just sit here and read every poem in this anthology to you, I would. The work in these pages is brilliant, heartbreaking, nourishing, tender, wise, funny, philosophical, and they explore vast worlds, from the grey eyes of grandmothers to the milky eyes of children, from the open then closed COVID year to clouds of torn bread in chicory coffee, milk and butter. Worlds where you are 5 and you love marmalade, to Albert Park Beach where no one dies. In this collection, there are poems where puddles expand and there is rejoice in ripples, poems that hate the urgency of phones, and poems infused with the peculiar pungency just before dusk. These poems are written in such tight, clean language that I want to keep reading and reading again. For me, poetry's job, if poetry does indeed have a job, is to express the seemingly inexpressible in the most original way possible. This anthology is bursting with poems that do just that, from both established and emerging writers. Anthologies are fabulous opportunities for many voices to come together, and no one voice in this anthology feels any less powerful or any less important than any other. The 55 poems in this anthology make up the prize longlist. The shortlisted poems are Yvonne Adami's Found Photo, Ez Fong's Clot and Marrow, Lynn McCredden's Shelter Us, Denise O'Hagan's As Water Is to Mist, Renee Petitschip's Now and Up, which won first prize, Sarah Rice's A Touch of Light, Lindsay Tuggle's The Specimen Dream, which won second prize, and the two emerging poet winners are Libby Angel and Bridget Webster, whose poetry fits so perfectly here. The Poetry of Encounter could easily serve as a black box of all that's happened these last few years. In testament to the power of the writing and the emotional paring back of these poets, I found something of myself in these pages. I felt seen and heard, scrubbed raw, soothed, smoothed, exfoliated, and moisturized. And the poems are brilliantly curated in such a way that each poem felt like a springboard from which to launch myself into the next poem. They were deliciously nourishing and left me open, receptive, and glimmering, translucent as an onion. As Anne and Rose say in the preface, poetry has the potential to articulate what is difficult and to carve out reflective spaces in which to understand and to communicate that insight. The poets in this anthology do this and then some. By shining a light on their own insights, these poets spark a match in us, and our own insights ignite. For me, this is how poetry works. This is how the fire of poetry takes hold. Only a mere handful of years ago, I was someone who claimed to hate poetry. And I've written here in my notes in block capitals, please don't judge me. When I was growing up, what little poetry I was exposed to felt as though it wasn't written for the likes of me. It wasn't written for working class me, uncultured me, who do you think you are me. It wasn't written for my family, it wasn't written for my friends. There were no books of poetry in our home. The most poetry we were ever exposed to was one line from Robert Burns on Valentine's Day, "My love is like a red, red rose." And again at midnight on New Year's Eve, or Hogmanay as we call it in Scotland, when we'd sing a chorus of Burns's Auld Lang Syne. So having claimed to have been a hater of poetry, and in fact, I realize now I didn't hate poetry, I just hadn't been exposed to poetry that was relevant to me. But imagine my surprise 6 years ago when short random things started bursting out of my pen. I sought advice. What could these short things be? It turns out these things were poetry, and it's what I've spent this last 6 years of my life reading and writing. In Meandering Quarterly's What I'm Reading series, I was struck by this snippet of Tim Loveday's quote. He says, "Poetry is closer to visual art than it is to say fiction or non-fiction or even most music." Then he goes on to say, "Poetry is a small window, a window framed by just a few stanzas." I think this is such an exquisite way to describe what poetry is. When people ask me what I write and I tell them poetry, Their eyes very often glaze over. And I've often wished there was a way of describing poetry that might bring more people to it. So I got to thinking, what if we told them we weren't writing poems, but worlds framed by just a few stanzas? What if we told them we were writing windows they could climb through? Of course, anthologies are, in my opinion, a brilliant way to bring more people to poetry. Anthologies are the chocolate boxes of the poetry world. There is something in there for everyone. They are a fantastic way for us to be exposed to poets we may not otherwise have discovered, all here between the pages of one convenient book. Some years ago at Sydney Writers' Festival, visiting Irish poet Paul Muldoon said that writing poetry is like being an adventurer, that when you start to write a new poem, you never know where it is going and where it will end up. He also said that when you're writing poetry, it's important to know where it's going, but it's crucial to not know. In other words, abandon all of your preconceived ideas of where a poem is going as you write. Give in to the process. Trust your pen, stay out of your own way. I would now add to Paul's statement that reading poetry can also be an adventure, if we are open to the potential a poem can bring, if we are prepared to climb through its windows. With this in mind, I urge everyone to open the pages of this anthology with a sense of adventure. Let's all be the Indiana Joneses of the poetry world. In Rosie's and Anne's preface, they also ask, what might it mean to encounter the strange skin of the unexpected? I loved pondering this question, and it led me to go from imagining poems as windows to imagining poems as skins, very often strange skins. Poems are the skins we wrap ourselves in. They guard our bones, our muscles, our internal organs. They protect us from the elements. The best poems graft themselves onto our cores. They are the scar tissue that gathers around our deepest wounds. And so when poets take risks with their work, when they take themselves out of their comfort zones, as they do in this anthology, their risk, their daring takes us readers with them. They give us permission to also be daring, to dip our toes into the unfamiliar and strange skin of their world. And if we are lucky, we will see something of ourselves and our worlds in their lines. I once attended an opera masterclass at Sydney Conservatorium of Music. I wasn't singing in this particular class, but I was in the audience listening to the singers on stage being put through their paces. Some of the singers were tentative. You could see they were holding back, reluctant to really let go, to really allow themselves to embody the song. The visiting American voice coach was working hard to get them to really try to feel the song in their bones, to get them to take that leap, to take that risk, to sing as though the world might at any moment end. As the day drew to a close and the voice coach was rounding up the masterclass, he finished with what I thought was such a profound quote. He said, "Safe singing, what's the point?" This pearl of wisdom has never left me. It sits on my shoulder as I write today. Safe poetry, I say to myself, what's the point? The poetry of Encounter is a collection of poetry that takes risk, and there are windows of every shape and size to climb through. This anthology is a living, breathing skin, a deliciously deep poetic well from which to drink. These poems are courageous. They bristle and they itch, they calm and they soothe. They are everything we need our skin to be: great protectors, great nourishers, great guardians of all that we are. Thank you, everybody, for your attention. I hereby declare this anthology launched.
Thank you so much, Ali. What an absolutely wonderful launch. I think I saw somebody say in the chat, wouldn't it have been great to have this in the book? But, perhaps we can, talk with you about being able to circulate that, because that was really inspiring. Thank you.
Well, thank you
so
so
much. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so having officially, wet the baby's head with Ali's launch speech, we would like to introduce the prize winners. Second prize winner, Lindsay Tuggle; first prize winner, Renee Pettit-Ship, and to have them read their work. So if I could ask Lindsay, please, to go first. Lindsay Tuggle, I'll just introduce you, is the author of a number of books. The Afterlives of Specimens, which was glowingly reviewed as a cover feature in the New York Review of Books, and her debut poetry collection, Calenture, which was one of the Australians' Books of the Year, shortlisted for the Association of the Study of Australian Literature's Mary Gilmore Award and Australian Poetry's Anne Elder Award. Her limited edition chapbook, Kinship Studies, is forthcoming with Gazebo Books. Thank you very much, Lindsay. I'll just spotlight you and hand over to you to read The Specimen Dream. We can't hear you. Oh, yes, now we can.
Thank you so much, Rose, and Pauline, and Ali, for that beautiful introduction, and to all the poets in this anthology. It's such a privilege to be part of this extraordinary book. This poem is called The Specimen Dream, and I actually wrote the first line of it a couple of years before COVID. It's got a lot of duality to it. But at its heart, I think it's about the ways that the scar tissue that Ali spoke of binds us to one another in ways that heal us, I hope. So I'll read it now. Everyone was talking about the weather, the year we learned to fear touch. We were so lovely and unharmed a girl ago. Oracles marked by fits and starts, fluent only in rapture, slow-limbed and grass-stained, amnesiac after the first sip. This is the new past, a steady progression of scars and acolytes. Transience is essential to our survival. Wanting to go all out, we settled on strict rations, a diet of mirage and cured meats. Regarding suffering, she said, it's all in the technique. Now our wounds glow like radium girls, green-sleeved, half-lived, radiant as ghosts on their way home. We are still paying for our own atrocity tours. Pastel girls, bellwether violent ends, hewn in so many bodies of water. Their limbs never felt the blank space where another body once rested. So much depends on preserving the stain of their dirty feet against white sheets. We inherit their glassine eyes and brittle bones, their unmade beds of hair, their way of standing perfectly still. All our borrowed gestures of protection for winter, for warmth, echo the clouds of their breath in the cold. We do not ask to see their fate or ours. It is not always better to know. Aftermaths are trauma's fingerprints, always beckoning. Indelible as laughter in the hippocampus, a face so familiar it threatens to shatter the screen you fumble to pocket. When the fires won't light and the rituals hearken only despair, keep your dead well covered and your prophecies false. Remember to remember what her face looked like in sleep, how the undying tugs at me, an animal within an animal, home to her still singing limbs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. A really, really beautiful and moving poem. I'd like now to introduce the first prize winner for the 2023 Liquid Amber Prize, and that's Renee Pettit-Ship. Renee's first poetry collection, The Sky Runs Right Through Us, published by UWAP, won the WA Premier's Literary Award for an Emerging Writer in 2019. Renee's debut non-fiction work will be released with Fremantle Press in 2023. Renee currently lives in WA's Great Southern. So thank you, Renee, for reading your prize-winning poem, Now and Up.
Thank you, Rose, and thank you to everyone at Liquid Amber for making this prize possible. I think it's such an important thing for all of us to feel heard. So it's beautiful to be with you, with all of you here, but also just to hear the quality of the poems is extraordinary. So thank you. I was actually a bit surprised to realize I felt quite emotional as I came to look at the poem before we all met today. And winning this prize is not only important to me, but to Uncle Yui, who this poem is dedicated to at Now and Up, and all the people at Gondwana Link. And this poem I wrote 3 years ago, and it wouldn't get anywhere, and I couldn't work out why. And then I realized I needed to come back to what Uncle Yui was trying to do out at Now and Up. And what they're doing there is restoring country. And, you know, his mantra is healing country and healing people. So when you go there, all you can see now is bushland, and it's incredibly beautiful, and the echidnas and everything is starting to return to that bushland. But perhaps even more importantly, within that space is a place for everyday Australians and Noongar people, the Aboriginal people down here, to meet. And in particular, the stories of the stolen generation for me have changed something fundamental for me, and something. It's really interesting that healing has come up, you know, in both the prize-winning poems, because there's something important that happens for Australians who hear the stories that are told at Now and Up, but there's also something important happens for those people who are telling those stories. And I would say it was beyond reconciliation. It's something beautiful and healing that is happening out there. So it's so wonderful to see it recognised in this poem that I'll read to you now. And there's a lot of words, so if they just wash over you, that's okay. Now and Up. I can hear the men in the distance collecting parang, brushwood, but the wind wants my ears, claims them, so their voices only come in and out between gusts. The sweat of the men feels far from me as I sit on the soft heart of the breakaway and wait for the words to rise from this place, winter dry and sun-loved. Mallee country, the range always at the edges of our vision. I'd never seen the range before at twilight, never seen a crescent moon lower its thin cup over the mountain's darkening body, scooping the last of the just lit sky. Koikayunaruf, place where the eye and clouds are drawn, and I am drawn, and the clouds are in love with the peaks, rubbing their soft bodies against the event of them, their fold and stack in country more defined by sky. I crane my neck, but the range is slipping into darkness, your tired eyes held wide for ruse. Headlights, a continual question pushing out before us. putting up our tent, the memory of this soft heart elsewhere, the sweet scent of Mallee country, and the moon lowering now, going steady, steady toward the earth, to leave us with a lit confetti of stars, a hush of stars. Humbled by stars, we agree we are outnumbered. After the meal, the fire, the smoking ceremony. Head full of cold, I don't want the smoke on my skin, the stench to catch in my hair. I step back from the thick soup ascending toward sky, turning for a moment to the heart of the fire. Quiet, light. I am embraced by a world of white. The shed's globe has lit the leaves' last breath, and its scent is soft. Erased, enveloped away from eyes, cocooned by the leaves' lost lives. Enfolded in foliage. The shock of it, being held. 2. No clouds. We all sleep rough from 1,000 cuts from the cold. Morning is a song off. Morning is incomprehensible. Morning is the moment before us when the world belongs to the birds. You walk with me to the breakaway. We climb and follow the red line of its spine. It's hard and soft. This country opens before us in light, slow surprise. I haven't heard a story of hope in such a long time, yet here we are with the plain spreads before us, with nothing but life layered upon life, as far as the eye can see. You are slow-eyed and sleepy, beanied against blue. The clouds have left the range, but our eyes are made to love the shift and shadow, a place of now and before. 3. The men's voices move along the track like music, like a forgotten song. I don't want them to see me. I want them to forget me. I want to hear them sing. 4. The men have finished building the Maya-Mayas and return winding along the track at the edge of the breakaway in Camberang, under a new spring sky. We gather in a hut made early in this country's new history. The parang fragments the light. Building breathes Mallee in, Mallee out. All over the pale faces of children, over visitors with their hats and cameras, the man with the microphone, and elders settled deep into plastic chairs. The striped light lays over our bodies, bright strips of us softening as we are woven into something new. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much, Renee. Anne and I loved reading that poem. I think anybody who reads it will love it, but certainly hearing you read it just gives it a whole new dimension. So it's a great privilege to have you share it with us tonight. I'm struck too by your comment that, sometimes poems, can sit not quite firing or blossoming somehow. And I think that, if I understood you correctly, that need to sort of maybe go back and find the heart of it, or, work with something that has not yet been, really grappled with, whatever it might be, to find that heart and actually unpack the poem in the context of it. I certainly feel like that's what you've done with that poem. So thank you very much, and thank you. Congratulations again, Renee and Lindsay. Wonderful work.